So hi everyone, I'm Marc Weinstein. Nice to meet you all. It's feeling a little startup conference-y in here, so if we can just get the energy flowing a little bit. What I'd ask if you could just turn to someone next to you, maybe someone that you haven't met yet, and just give them a little double high five and introduce yourself. Is that okay? Just a little activity in the crowd. Yeah, there we go. All right. Hi, I'm Mark. Wait, double high five. Come here. All right, cool. So yeah, right. That was great. That just, I think, just lightened up the energy in the room a little bit. So Wolfgang mentioned the Fyre documentary. How many of you have seen the Fyre Festival documentary on either Netflix or Hulu? Okay, cool. So there's a fair amount of you. For those of you who haven't seen it, just suffice it to say that the event was a massive failure, and you can watch the documentary afterwards. So I was at a conference in Berlin just a couple of weeks ago, which is actually how I ended up here, and I asked this question to the audience, and I think that German people have such a humility about them that nobody raised their hand, so I hope that I see more hands in the audience this time. This is a startup conference, so there's a lot of high-powered investors and entrepreneurs in this space. How many of you would consider yourself to be a high achiever? Okay, so a couple. All right, so it's loosening up. Keep your hands raised. How many of you are startup founders? Okay, and how many of you are venture capital investors, writers, creatives, went to a top university, et cetera, et cetera? Okay, great. Everyone in the room basically raised their hands at one point. So this is a room full of high achievers. So I consider myself to be a high achiever. My whole purpose from a young age, my parents told me, get good grades, go to an Ivy League school. And so that's what I did. I focused on the game that they created for me, the game of getting good grades and going to an Ivy League school. And I went to Wharton and I studied finance. And then when I got to Wharton, the game was up. And it was like, what's next? And everyone at Wharton seemed to want to go into investment banking. And so that was the game that I played, get good grades, become an investment banker. And I worked in investment banking for 2 years at Jefferies & Company and Morgan Stanley before I finally decided to create my own game. And I took the leap of faith that many of you here have made, and I started my first company. And this was a financial services company called Tinco. And it wasn't necessarily that I was passionate about financial services, but it was what I knew. And it was an opportunity that I thought could be a massive success. And how was I defining success? Well, I was defining success by that billion-dollar exit. I was defining success by making money or having, venture capitalists support me. And I think that, part of Fyre, for me, one of the lessons that I learned is that when we value these kind of superficial desires that culture might set for us, then we can get ourselves into trouble. And it's most important for us to trust our intuition. And so I fell on my face after my first startup company failed. And then I built a second startup company because that's what all of the entrepreneurship books say to do, right? You fail at your first startup, you go ahead and you build your second startup. And so I did, and my second startup was in the music industry. It was a music festival business called 90s Fest. And it was literally totally different from finance because I was building a business of fun. And so this is just, have you ever desired something so badly that you were willing to ignore your own better judgment to get it? So 90s Fest, I started it. I was working on it for 2 years, and after 2 years, strong competition came into the space, and they were whooping my butt. And so here I am at the beginning of 2017, Mr. High Achiever, Wharton graduate, Morgan Stanley alumni, on my second potentially failing startup, and I really had no idea what to do. I ended a 10-year-long relationship with my childhood sweetheart. I was fighting with my best friend over a drawn-out battle over both of the startups that we created together. And I moved to a new city in Los Angeles and was getting my bearings there. And so I was badly in need of a win, and I was willing to do whatever it took to get that. And so here I am, kind of applying to dozens of jobs, trying to get back on my feet, and I get a phone call from a friend. And we'll call my friend Charlie. Charlie was at that time the representation of everything that I thought that I had failed to achieve. He was a venture capitalist in New York City. Every deal that he touched turned to gold. I think he had like the most IPOs of his entire associate class. And so when Charlie spoke, I naturally listened. And he told me about this new music company called Fyre that was building a talent buying application, and they were launching a music festival to promote that application. He told me that given my history as both an entrepreneur and a festival producer with 90s Fest, that I would be a great fit for the role. And he said they just needed a little bit of help with logistics. So, grateful, I took the lifeline that was handed to me by Charlie. But you see, months prior, I had heard of Fyre Festival before. I saw Ja Rule present Fyre Festival at a conference for event organizers called X Live. And if you see the documentary, he's actually on stage with my former partner, Zach, who's laughing, as I was, because it seemed too good to be true. But fast forward months later, and the promo video comes out. Who here has seen the Fyre Festival promo video? Yeah. It's very appealing for people that want to go attend this thing. And I actually knew the producer of the promo video. His name was Max. He worked at a company called Map Productions. And so I met with him, and he told me that they were, quote unquote, crushing it, that they sold out 2 weekends in a row for the festival. So now my initial reaction is, I think this is too good to be true, and I laugh at Ja Rule, but I have a new option with all of the commensurate glitz and glam that's tied with it, the opportunity to live like an influencer for a weekend, the money and success that it was promoting, and a friend of mine who represented everything that I thought that I wanted telling me that I should do it. And so I took the bait, and I got on my first call with this guy. And it seemed okay, and then I got on my second call, and within a week, I was on a flight to the Bahamas to meet Billy in person. This is Billy McFarland, by the way. He's the founder of Fyre Festival. He's now serving time in prison for fraud. For those of you that don't know, that's not prison. No, I don't think that's a prison activity, but good question. So I get to the Bahamas, and I joined my first production meeting, and we're about 4 weeks out from the festival. And as Wolfgang mentioned, producing events is hard. I'm sure some of the 1E9 crew can attest to that. And everything that seems to go wrong with events usually does, which is why you need to make plans, and then plans and contingency plans of those contingency plans, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I get into my first production meeting with Fyre, and the red flags are everywhere. There's missed payments, there's late shipments, and there's team members that had been there for a week that were already leaving. And so, again, I knew it was messy, that's why they brought me in, but I didn't realize how messy it was until this meeting. And so there was an opportunity for me to walk away. But why didn't I walk away? FOMO. So FOMO is this kind of funny word. It means fear of missing out. But, we use it as a meme. But the reality is that FOMO is real. Raise your hand if you felt FOMO before. Yeah, look, it's full room, right? So FOMO is this toxic form of envy that makes us feel like we need something that we don't already have. So there I was, thinking, wow, this is a mess. But I stay. And I'm asking myself, what if Fyre Festival is a huge success? What if it becomes the biggest festival ever to hit the globe? Massive success, and I'm just the idiot that doesn't get it. The failure again. And so I sucked it up, and I stayed. And for those of you that have seen the documentary, you know what happened next. It wasn't exactly the fantasy island that had been promised to guests nor to employees like myself. And so I think that, with FOMO culture, we all struggle with this today because the social media machine that was meant to be a connection engine that brings us all closer together has actually become a comparison engine that's ripping us further apart. my internet is different from your internet, and his internet is different from her internet, right? The internet today, the social media algorithms are actually reading what it is that we desire, what it is that we think we lack, and feeding them back to us. So if you think that you're not pretty enough, well, guess what? You're going to get pushed a lot of beauty ads. If you think that you're not wealthy enough, there's no shortage of get-rich-quick schemes online. Just Google get rich, and you'll see, I think, 1.4 billion hits come up in less than 1 second. If you want to be a celebrity, you'll get pushed influencer ads. And so more than ever, with the advent of social media, I think that we struggle with this sense of envy, with this sense of external gratification. And we have these holes that we want to fill. We want to fill them with money, with success, with the model girlfriend, or whatever it is, right? We all have something. And Fyre played into that desire. Fyre sold FOMO. It sold envy. And it did it through influencers. And it did it through social media marketing. And so if we're bombarded by a constant message, right? How do we deal? How do we deal? You know, this conference is about how technology can improve the human condition. And I would say that, you know, we were promised flying cars, and what we got was 140 characters, right? I think that in a lot of ways, the technology has not been supporting and improving the human condition. And these challenges that we face are very much human issues. And so, you know, I'm a big fan of Tristan Harris and the Center for Humane Technology, but I don't necessarily believe that it's going to be technology that pulls us out of these challenges, because we're just carrying our emotional baggage with us into every new generation of technology, right? So I've been thinking about what could have saved me from participating in this massive disaster. And the first step that I think could have helped me is awareness. It's an awareness that what you see is not always what you get. This is a post that I made just a week before Fyre Festival. View from the office today could have been worse. Now, great, good on me for having a positive perspective, for taking a photo of a beautiful beach, when I was literally sitting in front of a computer for 15 to 20 hours a day, trying to book 1,200 beds on an island with a population of 5,000 people in less than 3 weeks, when every single hotel on the island had been booked 1 year prior because it was the biggest event of the year that weekend, the National Regatta. So if I wasn't willing to share my whole story, then I have to assume that most of us are just sharing a small piece of our lives on social media. And so I think that awareness that what we see is not what we get, that what we see on social media is just a small portion of someone's life, is just an avatar of someone's life, that's the first step. And I know that it can seem really obvious, right? It's like, obviously, you know, people aren't posting real things. But if you think about the generation below us, we're at record high depression and anxiety rates amongst young women. Facetune, the company that owns Facetune, which allows you to change your figure, is a unicorn company. $1 billion plus valuation. This is a tool that creates an illusion of what people should look like, right? And so we need to be aware that social media is pushing us this toxic form of instant gratification for external desires. The second tool, I think, as humans that we have in our arsenal, and you could call it a technology, is gratitude. So I described to you a scenario in my life in early 2017 before Fyre where it seemed like everything was going wrong for me. But the reality was I was still putting food on my table. I still had a ton of great friends. Thank you, 3 minutes left. And life was actually pretty good. And so if I had actually just identified that what I had was enough and been grateful for it, then I could have avoided some of the negative consequences. Just two here, this is a study on why gratitude enhances well-being. It reduces toxic emotions from self and social comparisons, and it reduces materialistic strivings. So if we're aware that social media is pushing us a false narrative, and we're grateful for that which we already have, then we're going to be far along in a path to happiness. And so I'm standing up here in front of you today in a culture that necessarily, like mine, doesn't look upon failure gracefully. Having participated publicly in one of the biggest failures of recent memory, and I'm going to tell you that I could not be more grateful for having experienced it. And that brings me to my next question, which is, why are we so terrified of failure? So fast forwarding a little bit, because I don't have much time, 2 years after Fyre Festival, the documentary was set to be released on Netflix. I had agreed to do that documentary interview in September 2017, just 3 months after the event. 2 years later, everything in my life had changed. I was working in venture capital. I had found my footing in LA, found a new life partner. Everything was going great. And all of my friends who were close to me that knew this documentary was coming out were like, why on earth are you putting your face along with Fyre Festival? They asked me if they were like, are you getting paid? And the answer is no. I didn't get paid for the documentary. But to be honest, I was freaking out. I was so scared. And I questioned, should I allow them to release this? Should I ask them to remove me, etc.? And ultimately, I remembered what someone told me, which is sharing is a gift. And I felt that if I shared my story with others, that it could inspire them or help them to avoid a similar fate to the one that I experienced with Fyre. And so the documentaries were released, and like everything that touched Fyre, it was a massive media storm. The Netflix documentary garnered 20 million views in the first 30 days alone, which is one of the most watched documentaries in history. And there I was, this failure, but the outpouring of reaction was mostly positive. And there are no failures, just experiences and our reactions to them. And so, I guess just summing it up, I find myself to be extremely lucky to be standing in front of you all today and extremely humbled that you were here to listen. I've had a lot of successes in life, and I've obviously had some big failures. But it's the failures that have taught me the most. So I've been a yogi for 10 years. I practice vinyasa yoga, I practice meditation, breath work, all those things. And it's helped me survive kind of the vicissitudes of life. And there's a practice called karma yoga. And karma yoga, I think, encompasses all that I'm trying to discuss with you in this presentation. The definition of karma yoga is to act and release the results of our actions without attachment. So I went from the achiever lifestyle, the high achiever lifestyle, which is entirely focused on outcomes, the money, the success, the fame, whatever it might be. We seek an outcome and we chase it. Now I'm trying, keyword, because I definitely am not doing this perfectly, trying to focus on the work without attachment to the results. And so in my yoga journey, I've discovered a man named Ram Dass, who I think can more eloquently put this than I can. He says, life is a game. You set it up, and then you play it. Purely, lovingly, compassionately, with total involvement, and without attachment. The key words to me here are you set it up. We get to set up and play our own games, not the ones that are pushed to us by social media, not the ones that we think we have to play because our parents told us to, but the games that we get to choose as individuals, sovereign individuals. The second is without attachment. I think if we act with awareness, with gratitude, without a desire for outcomes, without fear of failure, and without attachment, if we act in that way, then life can be more like a culinary masterpiece and less like a cheese sandwich. Or a cheese sandwich can taste just like a culinary masterpiece. So that's it. Thank you so much. My name's Marc Weinstein. I started a podcast called the Look Up Podcast. I know that this wasn't the tell-all that you all wanted, but there's a Q&A, so I'm sure we'll see some questions.
Thank you, Marc. This was amazing. Are there any questions for Marc? You can choose whatever question you want, and I'll just hand over the mic. So
yeah, if there's any questions, whoever.
Oh no, it's not. It's not even my job. It's Caroline, our great stage host. She's gonna
Thank
take
you.
over.
She's the best.
Hand over the mic.
Hello.
There's water up here. Hi, how's it going?
It's good. Interesting speech, thank you. I was just having a thought experiment in my head, thinking about how would it be if, instead of you being up on stage, holding the same speech, it would be Bill.
Yeah.
That is almost already the question, but I just wanted to say, seeing from your speech, it seems to me making a mistake is okay, but the fraud is the difference, I guess.
Yes. So I was left reflecting after the event, as to what happened and why I was involved, and if Billy was just this example of a young entrepreneur that was playing the fake it till you make it game and got caught. And I think it's exactly as you said, right? I think Billy in some ways was taking the paradigm of the successful entrepreneur and taking almost a toxic standpoint on it. I think we have something like entrepreneurship worship in the States for sure, where it's like solutions, not problems, fake it till you make it, things like that. I agree that there has to be a line somewhere, right? And I think the line is certainly, I think there is an objective moral truth, personally. I know there's others that would argue moral relativism, but at least the line of the law, right? And so when I discovered that, that Billy had committed wire fraud and forged investor documents, I think that's an obvious place where we draw the line. Now, the prison system is for rehabilitation. If he comes out in 3 years and he's working on something and he's truly changed, then good on him, right? And he could come up here and speak. I hope that's the case, but we'll see. Anyone, don't be shy.
Hi. So don't you think that all entrepreneurs, especially entrepreneurs, have to create this illusion of something big and grand in order to get people to rally around them? And you have to be like Billy a little bit, but yeah, okay, the legal things you shouldn't cross. But in essence, that's true, right? We all have to be a little bit like Billy, but without crossing the line of legal fraud.
Yeah, I think that's why it was so hard, afterwards to kind of think about what is this person just, evil? Because a lot of people, I think, the documentaries create, another thing I learned is narrative is everything, right? The documentaries create heroes and villains, and they really highlight Billy as a psychopath. I was questioning, Billy was 25 years old, he was $19 million in the hole, and he needed to do something. Of course, he crossed the legal boundary, and I don't like Billy really very much either. He owes me quite a bit of money, but to your point, someone much smarter than I am, Josh Wolf, the founder of Lux Capital, was being interviewed by Shane Parrish on a podcast called The Knowledge Project a few months back, and he was talking to Shane about the core identifiers that he uses to determine if an entrepreneur is going to be a success or not. And the number one factor in his mind is that a great entrepreneur is a great storyteller. And then he made the caveat that also the best con artists are the best storytellers. And so the job of the VC is to kind of identify and differentiate between these kind of great entrepreneurs and these con artists. The data points that I wish that I had, because after Fyre, everybody likes to point and say, oh, this was a failure, how could this have happened? This guy was faking it. We have Theranos as another example. I think that this is a theme, right? It's a recurring theme, Cambridge Analytica, other kind of frauds and nasty stuff happening in the Valley. The data points I'd like to see is the companies that are now successful that did just what you said. I don't know how many are out there that were faking it till they made it and in fact did make it, because we only hear about the ones that didn't. So it'd be fascinating to see that information. Obviously we never will, because looking backwards, no one's ever going to admit that they had nothing when they were pitching their startup vision.
Hi, I'm Tom.
Hi, Tom.
I don't know about that yoga thing you described, but basically everything you said in the last like 3 to 5 minutes of your speech sounds like Stoicism, which is really old. So I was wondering if you got in contact with any Stoic concepts.
I love that question. I've been reading the Daily Stoic.
Yeah, pretty much.
Every
Yeah,
day.
me too. Yeah.
Marcus Aurelius, Meditations.
Exactly.
Huge inspiration. Totally. I think that yoga and Stoicism have a lot in common.
Okay.
They're both the science of self, just from different time periods. It's
Yeah.
an evaluation and improvement of yourself. That's what you can control,
Yeah.
not necessarily external factors.
And detach yourself from results and
The obstacle is
don't
the way.
take everything as granted and so on. Right.
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
I
Just
love
wondering.
that. Anyone else? You can ask about Fyre too, by the way. I'll open it up if you have specific questions. People are usually like, I wanted to hear the tell-all. Oh, hi.
My question actually just goes in a very similar direction because when working in a startup, especially if it's your own startup, I mean, somehow you have to have a business plan. And it goes to kind of you saying you're not focused on the outcome so much, but just on the work without being attached. But I think being attached to what you do and passionate about what you do is very important. So how do you kind of balance those things, and what are your tips?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think it's really hard. And I wouldn't say that I necessarily have that one figured out yet. You know, passion is not attachment. I think that you can really firmly believe in what you're doing and work hard at it, but you don't self-identify with what happens. And so, you know, for me, my startup companies, the two that didn't work out, as I planned, you know, I think they became an extension of myself. Like, I was Tinko, and I was 90s Fest. And as they went, I went in my mind. And that's the way I operated. But we're so much more than what we do. You know, we're complex. And so that's just one element of who we are. What I love is, like, if I go to a conference and instead of the first question being like, what do you do? You know, it's like, what do you like? Or, you know, what excites you? So that's, I guess, I don't know if that's helpful or answers your question, but that's kind of how I think about it. Yes? I would like to take a remark. Is this okay for you? Yes, please. It's not only about an individual decision, what you did to work in Louis' party, but I think it should also reflect on the circumstances. You want to say the zeitgeist, you know, the kind of wave of it, you know. When you're in the middle of a financial crisis or just before, people act much differently, you know. And so I think you would have decided much more differently if you had some examples before. So I think all entrepreneurs should also look very, very carefully at the environment, economic, political, whatever environment you're in, and then compare to the certain personal situation. And then you get kind of a two-level risk, you know, the personal risk, and then the zeitgeist, whatever. Platform. Yeah, did everyone hear that? That was really valuable. Yeah, I know we ran out of mics. Well, I'll try to repeat it, and you tell me if I did it justice, if I do it justice. So, I think you did very well. Thank you. In your situation, but I think that was a very difficult situation because the zeitgeist was against you, and these stupid guys who went. Yeah, so I think the comment was basically that we have our own individual actions, but those actions fit within a broader environment, which could be considered the zeitgeist, like pre-financial crisis as an example. You know, the actions that we take are often influenced by the environment that we live in. And I think you nailed it, and I think that's what I'm trying to speak about now is Fyre was one festival that had 2,000 attendees. The amount of media that it's gotten, you would think it was like bigger than Coachella or Burning Man, which are like 50 to 70x the size of Fyre. But the reason why it was so big was because of the zeitgeist of today, which is this influencer culture that we all live in on social media. And they knew how to tap into that from a marketing standpoint. And they did a great job. If they did anything right, it's building buzz, right? And I've not seen a festival have more success with that. And you're right, the way that we act is often influenced by the time period or the environment. I hope that we can shift. You know, like, we're here talking about tech, improving humanity. I'm really excited about humane technology or digital wellness, the idea that we can input values into tech. Now, of course, the question is whose values? And that gets back to, is there an objective moral truth in the world? I believe there are certain objective moral truths. That's like a whole philosophical discussion. But I really want us to come to a place where we're not being essentially used by our tech, and we can flip the attention economy on its head so that, you know, instead of us just basically being mined for our data, so that Facebook can make, you know, 95% of the advertising revenue, that we can start to extract more value out of this technology than we're giving. That's what I hope. So, thank you.
So we have last one question.
Cool. What's up?
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Steffi. Hi. Thank you for your talk. I was wondering, maybe that's a bit of a judgmental question, but was there a little part of you that was feeling a little glee or for the rich entitled kids who were fooled so easily?
So this is, by the way, not a judgmental question. Every time I talk about Fyre, this question comes out. You were very nice about it. Usually it's, don't you think these kids were getting what they deserved? My answer is no. I don't think anybody deserves to be kind of defrauded in that way. I guess this is a German word, right? Schadenfreude? Did I pronounce it right?
I looked it up.
That's the best word. So Schadenfreude, that's a great word. You know, I have to admit that, one, that's what brought this festival down in some ways. It was the cheese sandwich on Twitter that got the social media buzz going about how big of a mess this was. But for me, the sense of Schadenfreude I felt was probably the night before it started raining, and I was delirious, running on very little sleep, working kind of all hours of the day, trying to get this thing going, and watching like the founders just ride around on jet skis and talk about models and whatnot. And it started pouring rain. Me and 5 other producers were sitting outside of the only house that we could sleep in that night was a house that our biggest investor was staying in because it had leather movie theater chairs. It had a movie theater inside of it. We couldn't sleep in beds because we didn't have enough staff to turn over the beds in time for the guests to come. And so we're outside on the balcony. It's about 3 a.m. and it starts pouring rain, lightning, and thunder for about 20 minutes. And I remember this, and I actually couldn't, if I'm being honest, I don't know that this actually happened exactly like this. It's like one of those memories that might have gotten incepted. But we were laughing like mad. And I think someone said, at least now they won't get away with it. That was the only, you know, kind of glee I felt, but not for the guests. No, I felt bad for the guests, who, by the way, some of them had a great time. That's another story that's not shared. We could talk about that at a later date. Many people wanted to stay all weekend.
All right, thank you so much.